Hi, my name's Ozan. I wanted to share my story of being diagnosed with lupus, a chronic illness I didn't truly understand until it became a part of my own story. Most people don't know what living with lupus really means, and it's something I rarely talk about myself. But I now realize the importance of sharing my journey with other people, especially as I'm starting to challenge the belief that lupus can be managed without medications. My goal is to put my disease into remission, if not cure it entirely, without relying on harsh medications my doctor once said I'd need for the rest of my life, many of which I've already stopped taking. So I can't cover all of this in just one episode. So this series will explore different aspects of my nearly 4 years since being diagnosed. Let's be real, lupus is a long game. And weirdly, when I was first diagnosed, I thought, hey, you know what, just give me some meds. I was a little bit worried, but I was like, give me some meds and I'm sure I'll be better in like 6 months or something like that. Whoa, how wrong was I to even think that? This disease has chapters, has side quests, ups, downs, and everything that's in between that as well. But I'm still here, navigating it all and sharing what I've learned along the way, hoping my story resonates with you and offers guidance and inspiration as you navigate through your own health journey. Shocking, right? What are the chances of me getting lupus? And there's something that, mentally it's a challenge and it's a hurdle to navigate, particularly because you're like, why me? Why has this happened to me? But at the end of the day, that's not going to achieve anything. Dwelling on it all is not going to achieve anything, which is one thing that I've learned to work on, and I will discuss in a future episode. But having the ability to move forward and obviously acknowledge the pain of the past is a big part of actually getting healthier. So in this first episode, I wanted to talk about my lupus diagnosis story. I think it's really important to start from the first side of symptoms, the numerous doctor appointments, seeing specialists here and there. Also on top of that, the confusion, the helplessness, the physical and emotional pain of dealing with something that is by far the worst thing I've ever dealt with in my life. I wanted to share this experience with you, to share my learnings. So I'll have some key takeaways from my diagnosis story that can hopefully help you in your own healing journey. What is lupus? So lupus is a chronic autoimmune disease where the immune system mistakenly attacks healthy tissues and organs. This can lead to inflammation and damage in various parts of the body, which includes the skin, the joints, kidneys, heart, lung, brain, and blood cells. The most common form of lupus is SLE, which is what I have, and that affects multiple organ systems. Other types include cutaneous lupus, which primarily affects the skin only, causing rashes and lesions. Then you've got drug-induced lupus, which is normally triggered by certain medications that you might be taking, but generally resolves once you've stopped those medications. And then neonatal lupus, which is a rare condition that affects newborn babies, typically caused by maternal autoantibodies. So symptoms of lupus can vary widely, but often include fatigue, joint pain, skin rashes, and fever. The exact causes of lupus is not fully understood, but genetic and environmental and hormonal factors are believed to play a big role in it. So there's no cure from what they say, but treatments can help manage symptoms and reduce inflammation. But from my experience, I believe you don't have to rely on heavy medications that suppress your immune system for the rest of your life. While pharmaceutical treatments have their place, there are many steps that you can take to reduce your dependence on these drugs and their harsh side effects. I don't know about you guys, but I was feeling like shit when I was taking these medications. I felt absolutely horrid taking methotrexate. I felt absolutely miserable taking the steroids. And whilst they were giving me really good benefits, I felt like the side effects weren't sustainable. So I believe that there are many steps that you can take to reduce your dependence on these drugs and their harsh side effects. By making lifestyle changes, improving your diet, healing your gut, identifying your triggers, whether they may be foods, toxins, environment, those environmental factors I mentioned before, allergens, microbes, or stress management. You can address the root cause of your condition and potentially minimize the need for medication and put your disease into remission, and hopefully remission permanently. Let's get to the story of when I was first diagnosed with lupus. So dial it back to, I guess, around the period, so I can just give you guys some context, but it was around 2021, start of 2021. So it would have been around January, actually. I was actually feeling tip-top amazing. I had moved back to Canberra, which was awesome because I was hanging out with all of my friends who were in a very similar situation as me, who had lost their jobs in other states, and they had decided to come back home during this period because Canberra was its own little weird COVID-free bubble where the cases were so low that the restrictions were so low. So, you could go out and still hang out with friends. You could go out and play basketball, and they would ease those lockdowns, those restrictions even further, where like you would be able to go to bars, whilst Melbourne's in a complete hard lockdown that you can't even leave your house aside from going for a 1 hour exercise by yourself or with members in your household. So during this time, I got super healthy. I was playing basketball every day, going to the gym, doing calisthenics, hanging out with all my friends, being extra sociable, reconnecting with all of these people. I actually lost a lot of weight during this period. I became really healthy. All my friends were gym junkies back in Canberra. So I was like, look, I need to get back on that boat. I've been yo-yoing with my diet. I ruptured my Achilles a few years earlier. So I was just like up and down with weight, lived in Melbourne. And when I moved to Melbourne, obviously the burger joints were a massive craze at that point. So the big chubby kid inside of me couldn't say no to a nice, delicious brioche bun burger. So that got my weight up quite high. So then, I've lost a bit of weight. Some people thought it was quite unhealthy as well. Eating a lot of those processed protein bars with artificial sugar, which I don't think were good for me. But, overall, I thought I was quite healthy. But that turned for the worse when I started to feel these joint pain all through my fingers. And, what started as just a little bit of joint pain started to move into my wrist. And I was just shooting hoops one day with a mate, and I was like, dude, my wrist is getting really sore. And at this point, I actually started working again. So I was like 2 months into a new job. I was back behind a desk, plugging away on a keyboard. So I assumed that it could potentially be carpal tunnel. And my mate was like, yeah, I've had a friend that's had carpal tunnel. Just go get some scans done and you'll be able to figure it out. So by this point, I waited a few more days. The pain's starting to get a little bit worse. And I was like, look, I need to go see a doctor. Go and see a bulk billing GP. First mistake. Don't go and see a bulk billing GP when you have something serious. Actually, maybe go and get an initial screen if that's all the resources you can access. If that's the case, try and find a good bulk billing doctor. Go and see this random bulk billing doctor. Dismisses me and just tells me that I have a virus. I was like, okay, all right, I'll believe him. He's like, but come back in a week's time if the pain persists. The week goes. By this point, my lymph nodes are really swollen. My joint pain's starting to go all the way up into my elbow. Go and see him again. I was like, hey, look, I need to get some scans done. And he was like, look, I'm pretty certain that this is a virus. There's no point really getting all these scans, but all right, I'll get you to get your bloods done. And if anything shows in the bloods, then we'll go and get some scans done. But he's like, I'm pretty confident that it's only a virus. And then I wait another week. I go and get the bloods done. They come back all clear. The pain is just getting really bad at this point. Like it's leading up, going into my arms at this point. Every time I work out, I'm in significant pain. So I stopped working out. I go to him. I was like, look, I need to get these scans done. Like something's going on. I don't know what's going on, but I feel really inflamed. And I was like, I need to go see a specialist. And he was like, look, I'll go and get the scans done, but I can only refer you on until I get those results. I was like, dude, this is taking way too long. This guy just keeps dismissing me. I'm getting quite frustrated by this point, but I'll go and get the scans done. By this point, my arm is just so sore, both arms, especially when I wake up in the morning. I don't know whether it was the same for anybody else, But when your joints are so inflamed from the lack of movement and just staying dormant, I'm frustrated by this point, and I'm not taking a no for an answer from this doctor anymore. I go in to see him one more time. I was like, I'm going to demand that he goes and refers me on to a specialist, because I've spoken to my partner. My partner will Google Docs, who will go and look at all the symptoms. She'll come up with a Google diagnosis or an internet diagnosis of what you might have. And she was like, "Hun, you might have psoriatic arthritis." And I was kind of dismissed it. I was like, the doc's telling me that I have a virus. I don't think I have psoriatic arthritis. And she's like, all right, we'll just mention it to him. And I was like, okay, I'll mention it to him. So I go and see him. I was like, my partner thinks I have psoriatic arthritis. I need to be referred on to a rheumatologist. And then he denies me again. And he goes, look, you're just going to have to wait. I don't want to have to refer you on. And I was like, no. I just put my foot down by this point. And I was like, no, you're going to need to refer me on right now, because you're not giving me the answers. And it's been a month I felt like we were just dawdling. Like we were just wasting time, because I wasn't getting any answers from him. He just kept on dismissing me and telling me to come back in a few weeks, and I just couldn't take it anymore. So he hesitantly accepted and said, all right, I'll refer you on. Referred me to Canberra Hospital, to the rheumatologist department there. They tell me that it's going to be an 8-month wait until I'm be able to see somebody. And I was like, I cannot wait 8 months to be able to see someone. I'm so confused. I'm so tired. I'm so exhausted. I just need answers right away. So go back to see the GP, and he was like, look, you can try and find your own specialist. You have to make some calls around, but when you find someone, then I can write a referral to that specific doctor, and then you can see them. I call all the specialists around Canberra. They're all telling me it's going to be a 5 to 6 month wait. I was like, dude, I need like 3 weeks maximum. I need to see the specialist stat. And then I was like, look, I'm going to start looking for specialists in Melbourne and in Sydney. I was visiting Melbourne quite regularly at the time because my partner was still there. So I was like, Melbourne's going to be the best, but if I can find something in Sydney, I'll find something in Sydney as well. I was trying to find all the best specialists. I was like, look, the same way that I apply to my eating out rule, looking at Google reviews that are above 4.5%. So start looking, start making all these calls. All these specialists tell me it's going to be around a 4-month wait. I was like, nah. So I noticed there was a specialist not too far away from my place in Melbourne. I look at the ratings, it was like 3 stars. No one had any nice things to say in the reviews, and they were saying avoid at all costs, yada, yada, yada. But I was like, look, I was at my wit's end at this point, just needed to try and find some answers, and I need someone better than that bulk billing doctor that I'd been seeing back in Canberra. So I called them up, and they're like, look, we've got a cancellation, there's availability in 2 weeks' time. I was like, oh, thank goodness. I'm going to get this referral, get it sorted, and start seeing this doctor. So I see this specialist. He looks at me, starts noticing all the pain, my lymph nodes being incredibly swollen. Started to notice some dandruff in my head. And then he was like, it looks like you have psoriatic arthritis. And straight away, I was so annoyed when he had said it, because I was like, this doctor has just been completely gaslighting me and not acknowledging the fact that it could potentially be something more significant. And now you're telling me that it could be this. But he was like, look, we'll get some more tests done, and then I'll be able to give you the right answer. So go and get these further bloods done. Go and see him in a week's time, and he confirms it. He's like, look, you have psoriatic arthritis. And I didn't really understand what it was. I didn't do too much research into it. My partner just said I could potentially have it, and I didn't really look into what it actually entailed and how bad it could actually be. But he was a pretty cold specialist. He wasn't very detailed in his assessment of me. But I was like, look, at least he's come up with something. He's given me these medications, these heavy medications, prednisolone and methotrexate. Methotrexate. At a higher dose, it's actually classed as a chemotherapy, so cancer patients take it. At a lower dose, it's called a disease-modifying drug. And then there's prednisolone, which is a steroid. You take the steroid daily, you take the methotrexate 1 day a week. As soon as you take the methotrexate, you are knocked out for 3 or 4 days after you've taken it. Prednisolone, you kind of feel pretty good on it. You do have some weird side effects on it. Affects, I guess, your metabolism. Your body starts to really swell up and slow down. It can make you a bit off psychologically as well. But that bundled with just dealing with a new diagnosis is just a recipe for disaster. But hey, they do work, and the steroids did actually help reduce my symptoms and my joint pain. So straight away I was popping them, taking them every day, which was what I was told to do. But I could not go past taking the methotrexate every week. That was just killing me. And weirdly, when I did take it, after the first week of taking it, that's when my symptoms really started to flare up. And I don't know whether or not there is a correlation between the two, but I started to get all of these lesions all through my body. I started to get lesions in my scalp. So that dandruff stuff that I was discussing before started to get significantly worse. All my hair started to fall out. As you can see, I've got a pretty full head of hair right now, but you can see that there's some areas where I've still got lesions where hair's just never going to grow back. But I'm glad that it's come back to this point. I am just in all sorts by this point. I'm just like, I don't know what's going on. I'm speaking to a colleague of mine who, mind you, is an ex-nurse, and she was just so helpful and supportive throughout this whole process. Her poor husband has psoriatic arthritis, and he was an army officer, and he had to retire after he's diagnosed with psoriatic arthritis. So I was quite scared to hear that, because I didn't know anyone who had it, and to hear that someone had to stop doing what they wanted to be doing because of it was starting to create this whole baseline element of fear in my mind about what's ahead for me. But she was able to advise me so much, and I'm so thankful for her support, because it actually helped and assisted me so much. And she was telling me that her husband's on this gold standard biologics, and that I should start moving on to the biologics, which is a blood transfusion or an injection that they give at the hospital, and you take it once a month and you feel amazing. And I was like, oh, all right, if that's the case, I can't deal with this methotrexate anymore. I'm going to ask my specialist for the gold standard treatment. I go see the specialist, and I was like, look, I need you to put me on biologics. He's like, I can't put you on biologics. You need to go through a significant amount of time of trialing certain drugs. And if those drugs fail, then we can move you to the gold standard, because biologics are really expensive. I think it's like per dose, it's around like $5,000 or some shit like that. So for me to be able to access them under the Medicare scheme, to be able to get them at a subsidized rate of like, say, like $50 per biologic dose, for you to be able to put on that, we need to put you on other drugs. And those drugs fail, then I can write a letter to the government, and then they can approve your need for biologics. So they put me on this new drug called Avara. And this Avara drug was the death of me. I started taking it. I was like, all right, cool. I just need to start taking this. If this doesn't work out, I can then move on to the biologics. So I started taking it. After 3 or 4 weeks of taking it, I started getting very lightheaded, very dizzy, very weak, had to stop going to work. I speak to my colleague about it, and she was like, look, something is not right with you. You need to go see someone immediately. And I was like, I don't know what to do. I can't go and see that bulk billing doctor again. And she was like, look, I don't want you to see that bulk billing doctor anymore. I'll refer you on to a friend of mine who has a clinic, and they're amazing there, and they might be able to assist and just be able to provide you with more thorough care. Go and see this new doctor. And she is so thorough with everything. She starts just asking me all these questions. She starts talking about the Avara and some of the side effects of Avara. And she's like, look, potentially you are getting a bit of side effects to this drug, or we'll get some blood tests to confirm it. We'll get some blood tests done to confirm it. Go and get the blood test done. Come back to see her again, and she was like, your white blood cell count is so low right now. You need to stop taking these drugs immediately. Like, it's to the point where it's getting lethal. And I was like, whoa, okay. So I stopped taking them. And I'm so frail by this point. I'm just at wit's end. Like, I'm so confused. I don't know what's going on. Have no answers. And she was my saving grace, because then she referred me on to go see another friend of hers who was a rheumatologist, who, because of the recommendation, was able to triage my case and get to see it. And because of how bad I was at the time, I was able to see her almost right away. So I was able to see this specialist quite quickly. When I was in a clinic, I was just explaining that I was like, look, I need to move on to the biologics. I'm not feeling well. And this was under the suspicion from the GP that I was seeing that I could have something else. So then I go there, and she was suspicious about the lesions on my scalp. She was saying that they're a little bit darker than your usual psoriasis type of lesion. So she was like, look, I think you could potentially have something else. And I was like, what? And she's like, yeah, what do you know about lupus? And I was like, I do not know a single thing about lupus. And she's like, I just need to get this checked to ensure that it isn't or it is lupus. She's like, alongside of that, I really want to get your lymph nodes checked, because the one on your neck is incredibly swollen. And just to phase out any chances that it could be cancerous, we just need to get some fluid out of it and get it tested. So I was panicking at this point, because I was like, well, now we're talking about lupus. Alongside of that, we're talking about the chances of potentially having cancer, thyroid cancer. So as always, whenever I have a discussion with a doctor that doesn't go too well and requires further testing, I speed off to get those appointments sorted out ASAP, because I can't live with that anxiety and stress. I can't sleep properly when I'm dealing with that. So I got them booked straight away. The next day, I got the thyroid checked out, got the fluid taken out of the lymph node. And then I think 3 days after that, I went and saw the dermatologist that she referred me to, and she did like a keyhole little biopsy thing on my scalp, where she just cut out part of the lesions and part of the skin, and she took that in for testing. Following week, I go and book my follow-up appointment. The doctor obviously had some good news and some bad news for me. The good news was, did not have cancer. Thank you. Bad news was, they confirmed that I had lupus. So that was a completely new thing. I was weird at the time. I didn't know how to feel about it. I was somewhat relieved, because I was under like so much better care. My 2 previous doctors were just terrible. The specialist wasn't so great. At least he was somewhat getting me on the right track, but he wasn't so good. The bulk billing GP was terrible. But obviously that GP that my colleague had suggested was amazing. And this new specialist that was suggested through her was absolutely amazing. So I was somewhat relieved that I was under good care. But at the same time, it was just such a confusing period where I was so exhausted. I was defeated. I just wanted to be better again. And this was like after 3 months or so. So it was already such a long haul period. It was such a long period already. So she just suggested that I should increase my medication now that they've diagnosed me, so the symptoms don't have to be showing, because for them to get the best test results, they need the symptoms to be showing. So they told me to increase my prednisolone to 30 milligrams, which I was previously on 10. So that worked wonders. That helped with all the joint pain. That helped with all the skin flare-ups. It didn't help with the fogginess. It probably contributed to worse fogginess. And then the methotrexate was just straight poison. And she essentially told me that I couldn't move on to biologics, because biologics don't work with lupus patients. So she was like, we'll just have to give you this additional medication that lupus patients normally take, which is hydroxychloroquine. So you probably know about hydroxychloroquine. It's the stuff that Donald Trump was encouraging everyone to take during COVID. So if he was right at all, at least I was taking that. But that was it. Like that, they were the medications that I was taking. It was just an extended period of just trying to get the symptoms down and get them to a manageable state to be able to start working again. I ended up moving back to Melbourne during this period, and I was under my partner's care. I was previously under my mum's care, and she was so helpful throughout this time. I think I'm so glad that I was with my mum during this period, because nothing beats a mother's care. But my partner has been absolutely amazing and absolutely supportive throughout this all as well. So yeah, that's my story of being diagnosed. And it wasn't an easy one. It was very difficult. It wasn't a happy ending, but at least I was relieved to be able to know exactly what was wrong with me and some steps that I could implement to move forward. So, what are my key messages and what do I want to share with you? So, it's really important that you trust yourself and your body. If something isn't feeling right, you make sure you go to the doctors and go and get it checked immediately, and monitor those symptoms alongside of any other symptoms that you might be having. So just even track them if you possibly can, on just having like something in your notes where you're like, all right, I felt this day and I felt that day. Because depending on which doctor you see and how bad your doctor is or how good, they might not be able to put the pieces together. So you're able to give them all the information to make their job a little bit easier, that would be beneficial. But don't let them gaslight you and dismiss how you're feeling. So that's my second point about the struggles of navigating the medical system and the importance of self-advocacy in healthcare. So I think with this is really important that you're not letting these doctors tell you that you're not feeling a certain way because they think it's something completely different. Obviously, there might be scenarios where that's occurring, but you make sure that they take the relevant steps to get you tested to ensure that it might not be what you think it is. So doing all of that, but being persistent. So it's really important to be persistent throughout this process, because if they're not giving you the answers that you need, or they're not giving you sufficient amount of support, then go and speak to somebody else to seek a second opinion. So it's really important that you're taking charge of your medical journey. And that's about doing your due diligence. So just making sure that you're looking up that certain ways to deal with your medical condition, also ensuring that you're looking up ways to cure it, but not just relying on what the doctor has to say and the medication that the doctor gives you. If I was to do that, I'd still be taking methotrexate and I'll still be taking prednisolone. Thankfully, I'm no longer taking either of those medications and I feel so much better for it. I'm still monitoring my symptoms very closely, but luckily nothing is out of the ordinary, and I'm feeling fine without taking these drugs that had really bad side effects, and also alongside of that aren't good for you long term. So next thing is about monitoring your body's reaction to medications. I think this is really important because sometimes the doctor might just tell you to take these certain meds, and then they start really messing with you internally, physically, emotionally, and they might not actually be the right medication for you. But because the doctor told you to take it, you think that it's fine to just go ahead and proceed and continue taking it. But similar to my story about the Avara, and that being no good for me and reducing my white blood cell count to the point where I was almost fainting all the time and I was lightheaded and dizzy. You just don't want to be in that situation. And, thank goodness it wasn't anything more serious than what it was, but some of these medications would be doing far worse than good. So speak to your GP about that, or speak to your specialist about that. This is a really big one for me, and that's the emotional toll of chronic illness. I think this was probably one of the biggest things that it hits as well, just because you're just a shell of yourself, really. At this point, you're just so weak and you're vulnerable. Your mind isn't right. If your medications are messing with your, I guess, your dopamine levels, and shifting the chemicals in your brain, you could be in quite a rut. And it can feel very isolating, it can be very depressing, and it can be scary, especially when you're just juggling all these sorts of issues just coming at you at once. So it's really important that you have the right people in your corner when you're going through something like this. And that's your support network, and that's your support group. So don't underestimate your support group, which is my fifth and final point. So it's really important that you have the right people in your corner. You really identify people who are there to support you, because unfortunately, sadly, you're going to lose a lot of people in your life that you probably thought that you were closer to these people, but throughout the course of dealing with this, you thought that you might be receiving a little bit of additional support, but hey, a lot of people have their own things to deal with. and they're quite busy with their own lives. So it's really about identifying the people that are actually going to be in your corner and be there to support you through the tough times, support you through the hurdles, support you to the times where you might be dealing with a flare up and just need that little bit of extra support. Thankfully, I had my mum who was really supportive in the initial stages of my diagnosis. Secondly, I had my partner when I came back to Melbourne. She was taking so much care of me. I had a couple select friends that I could rely on, but sadly, I couldn't rely on a lot of them. And I don't know whether or not it was me pushing them away, because when you're in a bad mental state, you can do that as well. So it's about being mindful of not pushing away people. But that brings this to an end. That was my diagnosis journey. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you got some value out of everything that I had to share with you today. It is a pretty vulnerable topic, so I can get a little bit up and down and emotional about it, but I feel like I'm in a good space to start sharing this with the world and hopefully helping people who are dealing with something very similar to me. So my next video next week is going to be about dealing with lupus and just a day in the life and the day-to-day of dealing with lupus. So I'll be sharing a lot about that. So please tune in. If you liked what you saw today, like and subscribe to my channel, and I hope to see you as a viewer next week. Thank you so much. Bye.